Coming up on this week's episode of Check Your Balance is 4 money personalities. Which one do you identify most with? Stick around. That's coming up next.
Check Your Balances is a show produced and owned by Craftwork Capital. The views expressed by the hosts and their guests are personal opinions and should not be considered personal financial advice or the opinion of Craftwork Capital. All investments have risk and may lose money. Consult with your financial advisor, tax preparer, or attorney prior to implementing anything discussed, and please do not use this show as the sole basis for financial decisions.
Welcome back to another week of Check Your Balances. I am Ross Anderson, joined as always by my friend and co-host, Dan Maseka. Good to see you, bud.
Good to see you. And as I look at myself in the screen showing us what we look like, I've become hyper aware that I wear too many dark colors and kind of fade into the background of our backdrop. I will be making a wardrobe adjustment next time.
Yeah. And through movie magic, if you watched this episode recently on YouTube, or if you watched the prior one, you're going to know that we recorded this in the same day. This is us trying to batch together episodes. We didn't even change here. There's no movie magic. We recorded another episode 5 minutes ago.
I did think I should take the hoodie off, but it's also a dark color and it's freezing outside. So I'm going to stay snug for now.
Yeah, we've got a snowstorm brewing today, supposedly. So
we do.
Yeah, hope everybody out there is enjoying their winter. Dan, you sent something to me recently, and I thought it was a good framework for a discussion. And so we don't necessarily have a point of view that we're trying to take you to on today's show, but an interesting way to look at your money personality. And where did you find this? Was it just Instagram or just some influencer?
Yeah, I was doom scrolling Instagram and I saw this pop up. I feel like every real estate agent, like insurance salesman or anything of that ilk has a bank of stuff that they can fish in to post. This seems to be one of those, but I thought it was interesting. It's about the 4 types of money personality, and I thought it could be an interesting discussion. Not to say it's good or bad or indifferent, but at least to spitball on for a bit.
Do you want to go through the 4 and then we kind of break each one down and talk about the characteristics, or what's the easiest way
Yeah,
to
let's talk about
it?
the 4 and then we'll dive into each individually. It gives like a common phrase for each archetype.
Okay.
All right, so the first is the avoider. We have the optimizer, the worrier, and the dreamer.
Okay. Without saying anything else, I would guess that our show has less than 5% listeners that are the avoider, right? The avoider doesn't listen to financial podcasts.
That's true. They do quite the opposite.
I would bet we are 70% plus in optimizers. I think most people that listen to us are trying to figure out the optimum way to get their money to work as hard as it can for them and serve them in the best way possible. That's a compliment to you, by the way. I think most people that would come to this show are going to be optimizers. Give me the other 2 again.
All right. We talked about the avoider, the optimizer, the worrier.
I do think we have some warriors. Okay.
And then the dreamer.
Ooh, and yeah, I'm going to have to read Divvy. I bet we've got some warriors.
For sure.
I would bet warriors it's probably 20 to 30% at least.
Okay.
And then dreamer, it's going to depend on what these are. All right, let's get into them. Tell me more about the avoider.
All right. Common phrases for the avoider. I'm just not good at math, or we'll deal with it later. I've worked with some of these people.
Yeah, it's... Here's the thing about the avoider. The avoider, by that definition, can be incredibly successful with their money if they set up a few systems.
Right.
Like, you don't have to be an active participant every day, every week, every month in your money, as long as you're doing a few things right. If the avoider sets up a, let's call it, 10% to 15% 401k contribution and doesn't give their money another thought, that's okay. That person can avoid their money for probably decades as long as they set up a couple things properly.
Right. The avoider tends to not want to be bogged down with doing things. If they have something on the to-do list, it like bothers them. So they tend to just do nothing or figure out they'll have time for it later. I recently worked with an avoider who, again, when they set up their 401k, gave enough to get the match, but over the years has accumulated 6 figures in their savings account and hasn't done anything with it. So again, they can be very successful in a position to achieve really strong things. They just don't take the time to do anything or don't want to have to think about what to do with it.
Somebody that struggles to save after-tax cash might hear that and go, oh my gosh, that's an incredible amount of money. But it can absolutely happen for people that are not being particularly thoughtful about directing all of the savings. Like you and I have talked before about kind of this paycheck to paycheck notion. That if you've got all your systems set up right, it should almost feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck for me, even if you're well within your resources. Because to me, I want to automate enough things that what's left is all spendable, so I don't have to worry about where I'm going to put money on a month-to-month basis. And that ends up being like feeling paycheck to paycheck, but it's not. You're not at the end of your resources truly. Interesting.
Yeah. When we put together savings plans and investing plans, the language I use, whether it's good or bad, is it should almost be painful. Like you don't want it to hurt to do it, but you want it to be where if you were to like set aside a little bit more money that you couldn't spend, then it would start to be uncomfortable. And then you're probably calibrated properly.
I think that's true as long as your savings plan is calibrated, right? Like there are some people that are over saving for what they want to do.
Right.
Which that's not necessarily the avoider. That might be the worrier.
Right.
Okay. What's the next one?
Let's go to the optimizer. Common phrases for the optimizer. What if I don't account for all the variables? Or let me calculate the ROI first.
What if I don't account for all the variables is a tough one because, and we just spent the last 2 shows talking about some version of asset location,
right?
Which is almost exactly an optimizer sort of thought, right? Like if you're hey, I'm a 70-30 investor, I plug that and chug on all my investment accounts and you're like, whatever, this is what's good for me. That's not necessarily optimized, but it's probably effective. If you're what stock should go into which account and how do I make sure that my Peter Thiel PayPal money ends up in my Roth IRA, it's much harder to do. And I think we talk a lot about humility of knowing which of your investments are going to be the best ones. For most of us, I think even sometimes you look at your biggest winners and go, I don't ever think when I bought that was my highest conviction idea.
I have a hot take. The optimizer can be a secret avoider.
Okay, go on.
I think some people get so bogged down in the details of trying to find the perfect plan that it is really them avoiding making a decision or making any moves. You might look at something for so long, potentially years, and ultimately do nothing about it. You are avoiding making a money decision because you believe that there is some perfect answer out there when truly any answer could be a good answer. It's just a matter of doing it. But if you do nothing, you have perhaps taken the worst path.
There's no question that you can try and optimize to a point of paralysis, right? Like if you're so concerned with getting the perfect answer that you won't accept any answer that hasn't been proven perfect, you're going to be in trouble because all of this stuff is eventually within a range of possibilities. I think it's probably frustrating when I present information that way, but I will write in a financial plan, hey, listen, your range of like equity exposure that is appropriate might be between 60 and 90%, or might be between 50 and 100%. Like all of these might work. I'm trying to give you a box to stay within and then like give you a little bit of wiggle room to say, yeah, you could be a little more aggressive and it's not going to hurt you. You could be a little more conservative and it doesn't mean you're not going to meet your objectives. I present it that way because I do think there's a range, but that's probably way less. I think people like specificity.
Yeah.
You're like, look, 83.25% stock, Stan.
Yep.
All you have to do. All you have to do is 83.25% stocks. If you allocate that way right now, this is what's going to work.
Congratulations.
You did it.
You've done it.
You did it.
Yeah. I encounter this a lot when we're talking about allocations with target date funds. We did an episode on target date funds years ago. Essentially, they're doing an allocation for you based on the year that you expect to retire. We internally have models that we follow. So maybe my model will look a little bit different than a target date model. But if they're close enough, it's a matter of this is the easy button. The target date is the easy button. It's within a reasonable range of what we would do. So you can keep it if you want. And I don't think it would be bad. If you asked us, this is what we would do. Pick your poison.
Yeah. And to me, it comes down to knowing yourself. Do you know your behavior? Are you going to look at your account ever again? Are you the avoider? If you're the avoider, put the target date fund in your account.
It's right. It's easier. It's better than doing nothing.
Yeah, that's way more optimal than simply not doing anything. So yeah, if you're in that situation, don't over optimize at that point.
Yeah. One thing that I think we do well in financial planning, just to pat ourselves on the back again.
We like doing that on this show.
Is hopefully giving people the answer that is best suited for their approach. So knowing the people you're working with and giving them the solution that they're most likely to follow through with, because you can give a very detailed response to someone who has that analysis paralysis type response to information. And that might not be good for them. It might be too much information that they're just not even going to be able to process it. Whereas if you said this simple thing will work, that might be a better solution for them.
Yeah, I do think that's the challenge in our business. And there's technical things that we know and can know. And I think that there's strategy and there's being thoughtful and kind of seeing how this stuff plays out over the course of years and decades. And then there's, hey, how do you explain it to somebody to get them to take action? What do they need to know to make that decision and get active and do something? All right, Dan, tell me about the dreamer.
All right. We skipped the worrier.
You want to do the worrier? Let's do the worrier.
Sure. We're going in order. Let's do the worrier. WORRIER, not the warrior, in case my accent is making that hard to understand. All right. Common phrases. What if we lose everything?
Yep.
I think there might be a worrier in most couples. There's one person who is kind of in that position.
I occasionally bring this up. My mom believes the entire stock market is funny money. Just none of that's real until it's like cash in my hand. Just does not believe that it is an actual asset. I think there's a lot of people that view the markets, whether they think about it as gambling, whether they think about it as wispy, it's all just made up. I think you and I love investing because it's not made up. We know that there's things there. There's businesses, there's people solving a problem, there's a product, there's a market, there's all this stuff going on. And if you understand the mechanics of that and you love business, and then you understand that the stock market is just the way to access a bunch of them, that's how I think of the stock market. But the worrier can absolutely see, well, this could all go away.
Right, exactly. As easy as numbers tick up and down every day, they can tip down for many days in a row and just wipe out everything you've saved for.
How do you approach the worrier? I know what I normally do, but how do you help those people?
I think the biggest thing is not to invalidate the worry. I think it's actually to plan with that in mind. So by presenting a range of options of like, when we're doing a plan, here are the multiple paths this can take. What are the concerns? Well, markets can do poorly. Okay, good. Markets can do poorly. We can spend a lot more. Things can be more expensive. Good. Okay. Tax rates can go up. Great. Social Security can be gone. Good. Check all those off. Let's plan with that in mind. What's a realistic thing that could happen with each of those scenarios? And let's take a look and see how we can properly mitigate against it and build a plan that has defenses in place. I think that's the best thing, is showing them what can work. Like, what are these range of outcomes that are possible to us? What would it mean if markets did poorly, you spent more, and kind of quantifying that. All right, if this happened, if everything went to hell, it might mean working X number of years more to be able to make up that gap. All right. Sometimes just setting expectations properly is all you need. And if that doesn't work, well, maybe someone's just a worrier always.
Yeah, no, I like that. So you're going to basically go line by line. What are the worries? Tell me what your concern could happen. Let's talk about that. And this is kind of what we have in place. I find that the worrier is typically the cash hoarder.
Mm-hmm.
That's normally your person that has huge amounts of cash. I don't necessarily always think of that as the avoider that ends up with a bunch of cash.
Right.
So the worrier to me is normally going to present some version of, well, I don't want to let that go because that's my safety net. And my tactic there is typically to go through, let's talk about what that cash pile means. I like thinking of cash reserves in terms of months.
Mm-hmm.
If we know that your average burn in a month is $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is, if it's a $5,000 burn and you've got $100,000 sitting in the bank, you have 20 months. You have almost 2 full calendar years of no money coming in. You're okay. Is that enough? Right. So if I will generally convert it to months and say, how many months do we need? Right. Because it gets you out of thinking about how much money do I need to thinking about time.
Right.
And so I will normally try and break that cycle a little bit by making it seem like we're talking about time, not dollars. And ultimately, we're talking about both, but relating them back to each other rather than just talking about, well, what amount of money makes you feel secure?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think for some people, just watching those balances go up is the security blanket.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think in both cases, it's not to ignore the worry. It's to address the worry head on and just make sure that, we're not packing it away in the background of everything.
Yeah. Do you think there's a way to account for all of those concerns? I don't know that there's a way to account for all of them, right? Like, what if the stock market goes to zero? We know how unlikely that could be. There could be deep lulls. There could be deep cuts in value, especially in the short term. We've never seen a crash that the markets didn't recover from. So we know that. I think sharing that with people helps. We've never seen a collapse of the American economy. We're only a couple hundred years into this experiment, but
right.
So there's a bunch of things that have never happened. That doesn't mean they can't happen.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, how bulletproof could somebody truly be if that was their goal?
I think that's also a worthwhile conversation, right? It's like, what is the worst you can imagine happening? And being a student of history helps kind of to frame those conversations. I've been reading a lot about the American Civil War, and I can't imagine like a more traumatic experience for people living in parts of this country at that time, both from a sense of like existential, State of the Union, physical safety, all this stuff.
We don't know if we're going to be one country or two.
Right. But
weeks and months from now.
Also financially. I've talked about a book called Ways and Means, which addresses specifically like the financing of the war. It talks about the rampant inflation that went on in the American South and the Confederacy, because basically everything needed to be siphoned away for their war effort against America. And it was like, what do you do? There's nothing you could have done in that situation except for just try to survive. Like, that is the most extreme case. We came out on the other side of that, easy to say with a century and a half of hindsight, but America was nimble enough to be able to recover.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't mean everybody's story was joyful.
There were terrible stories.
That doesn't mean that
but
everybody.
There is nothing you could have done.
Yeah,
right?
Like what was the possible thing you could have done to prepare for that outcome?
Right. And if that's what you're planning for, you need like like Ruby Ridge case of like the cabin in the woods defended from a high point with canned goods and firearms.
I mean, there are people that do that. That's why we see preppers and all sorts of stuff.
For sure. And I'm not sure that's what you want your financial plan to be. But if someone is like devolving it to that, it's like, okay, is this really where we want to go to with this exercise here?
This is a very morbid thought. If there was like a zombie attack, right? Like, let's make it something silly, not actual civil war. But if there was a zombie attack and all my friends are becoming zombies, I don't want to be the one guy that survives in a bunker.
No.
I'm going to go be a zombie with my friends.
Right. Take me early.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's go.
It's like these live to however many hundred of years. People are like, who wants that?
Yeah. I'm not going to live in a shipping container by myself. That's not the existence I want.
Right.
I'd rather be a zombie hanging out, eating brains.
Yep.
Yeah. Sounds like a good time. No, I'm just kidding. All right. That's off the beaten path.
Yeah. That topic went quickly.
All right. Let's talk about the dreamer.
All right. The dreamer. Common phrases. It'll all work out, or the universe will provide.
It'll all work out sounds like the avoider to me.
I also was going to say that. It's a subset of the avoider. It's like, I'm not going to worry about this because money will come. Something will happen.
To me, that's not a dreamer.
No, I actually, before I read that, had a different.
Yeah, that upsets me about the dreamer. Now I'm mad at whoever wrote this nonsense. Right. But I'm happy that they turned into a piece of content for us. But I don't like that as the dreamer. I don't think that's who the dreamer is.
That's the avoider. There was a phrase in the avoiders. We'll deal with it later. That's also the same as the universe will provide or it'll all work out. That's like down the road. This is a future me problem or future me opportunity. Now I just got to keep on keeping on.
Yeah, no, that to me, that's not the dreamer. I think a real dreamer thinks things are going to continue to get better, right? We're on an upward ramp.
Right. I think you and I are half dreamer, half optimizer. Probably. I think we're similar.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting place to take it, but what are we? Because, yeah, I call myself like a pragmatic person. Like, I think I'm a bit of a realist, but I do tend to plan as if things won't get better, but kind of expect that they will. But none of my actual plans are expectations that it will get better. But I do tend to expect that we'll like maintain or at least figure out how to maintain.
Yeah. I think of the dreamer as the type of person who's always looking for opportunity and sees opportunity in the future, is willing to pursue it, even if it means sacrifice today, because that's not what it described it as. But when I heard dreamer, that's what I was thinking. I've seen dreamers too. I actually love working with dreamers.
Yeah.
Because then we're talking about possibility and not like, like failures. It's like, how can we make these exciting things happen? I personally love planning for that.
I love approaching a planning question from what would have to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that actually works both with the worrier and the dreamer. What would have to happen for that to be a problem? Or what would have to happen for that to come true? And that might be the car that you've always wanted, or the home, the renovation that you've always wanted. It might be flying private, right? Like who knows what that means? But if we approach our finances from what would have to happen, you start picturing a world that doesn't exist yet. And maybe that world is magical and exactly where you want to go and you want to build it for yourself. And maybe it's a hellscape that you'd like to avoid. and you're going to make sure that you're battle hardened away from it. But yeah,
that's funny. You know what? If we have one takeaway, I know we didn't really have a goal with this conversation. It was just a fun thing to explore together. But I think that is a good takeaway, is to look at every concern you have or every like exciting thought you have and frame it as what would have to happen to get to this point, because that is the building blocks of any plan, is what would have to happen to get here. And either that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's good to identify, right? Because it's an input into your plan.
Yeah. I think that's a nice way to think about it. Yeah, I don't see one of these. I think most people are going to be somewhere on a spectrum. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got some version of things that they optimize for. Everybody's got some version of things they worry about. Hopefully, part of your financial planning also has some dreaming into it. I don't know that the avoider is like the perfect one, other than just to say you should know what doesn't need your attention all the time.
Right.
I think that's the part of you that should become the avoider, is if you figure out what doesn't require your attention to go well, don't spend any of your time thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Which one are you? If you've got thoughts on this, we'd love to hear from you. Are you the avoider, the dreamer, the worrier, or I keep forgetting the fourth one?
The optimizer.
The optimizer. I think a lot of you are optimizers, but we would love to hear from you. Check your balances at outlook.com is the email address for our show. Thank you for tuning in this week. Hope to catch you soon.